Looking for the perfect soundtrack for your Canada Day shenanigans? Look no further. Canada Day, the playlist is 2 hours of carefully curated Canadian content, featuring 31 tracks from some of the best musical artists this country has to offer. We've got the hip, we've got the band, we've got the log driver's waltz. It's all here, in a playlist that spans the history of Canadian music from 1944 to the present, with a slight bias toward the turn of the century, because that's when I was in college. So crack a brewski or grab a Mickey, kick back on your Chesterfield, and just give her with Canada Day, the playlist. It's a real beauty. You can check out the entire playlist on Apple Music below. There is also a Google playlist available here. Carly Rae Jepsen, Run Away with Me. Let's kick this thing off the same way Mission's Carly Rae Jepsen kicked off her classic album, Emotion, with Run Away with Me, arguably the best opening number on a Canadian pop album ever. Disagree? Make your own list. And sure, this isn't Call Me Maybe, Jepsen's biggest hit to date. It spent 9 weeks atop the Billboard Hot 100, or even I Really Like You, its effective sequel. But just listen to Run Away with Me. You can't take issue with this song. It's too good. Spirit of the West, home for a rest. Keeping things local, we have Vancouver folk legends Spirit of the West with their biggest hit, Home for a Rest. If you ever find yourself so disoriented you've forgotten what country you're on, you're not at your best, say, put this on. If everyone in the room starts singing along, you're in Canada for sure. Drake, nice for what you just knew Drake was going to show up on this playlist. He's everywhere these days. The Toronto rapper is one of the biggest hip-hop artists in the world, and he's fully on top of his game at the moment, which is why I've chosen his most recent single, Nice for What. Not only is it a bona fide jam, but it has a great sample, and some of Drake's best rapping in quite a while. Like many rappers, he occasionally forgets what he's about and sings in a mopey monotone for long stretches. Nice for What also has the added benefit of being the most recent Canadian single to top the Billboard Hot 100, a feat that has only happened 49 times since 1944. Guy Lombardo, It's Love Love Love, the 1944 song that got the ball rolling for Canadian artists seeing success south of the border. Ontario-born band leader Guy Lombardo's It's Love Love Love. If your heart goes bumpity bump, it's love, 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 sings Lombardo. So now you know it's not a song about a three-way tennis match. Justin Bieber, Sorry. Here's a very Canadian song. Not only is it by one of Canada's biggest exports, Justin Bieber, but it focuses on one of the most Canadian words of all time. Canadians, as you may well know, apologize even at the idea they may have inconvenienced someone else. The other day on the seawall, a man rode his bike close to my foot, and we both said sorry. That's just how we roll in Canada. The tragically hip Bob Cajun. You can't make a Canadian playlist without a hip song, so we're slowing it down with one of Gord Downie's great ballads. I thought about Fireworks, and a friend recommended 50 Mission Cap, At the 100th Meridian and Wheat Kings, but at the end of the day, this is my playlist, so I picked my favorite one. Sloan, The Rest of My Life. Speaking of Canadian rock bands that simply have to be here, Sloan. Like the hip, there are innumerable songs to choose, but I went with The Rest of My Life, with its very Canadian lyric. One thing I know about the rest of my life, I know that I'll be living it in Canada. That rings especially true these days, since America has become a scary country. Let's just stay here. Sam Roberts, The Canadian Dream. You can't make a Canadian playlist without a boatload of classic rock, but since this is my playlist and not your dad's, I opted for this fun, tongue-in-cheek Sam Roberts ditty instead of, Say Something by BTO. Fun fact about The Canadian Dream, it doesn't appear on the American release of We Were Born in a Flame, the album on which it's featured. Socialism is the only way, sings Roberts, and the thinking was that those greedy Americans don't want to hear crap like that on their rock albums. They only want to hear about the American dream, which I've been led to believe is making enough money to leave New Jersey. The Weaker Thans, One Great City. Here's another ballad, this time by Winnipeg rock band The Weaker Thans. You may not know this song, but as a Canadian, it's sure to resonate with you when lead singer John K. Samson sings, "I hate Winnipeg." That is, after all, a very Canadian sentence. Bryan Adams, feat. Mel C. When you're gonna to borrow a line from Mark Twain, a very good playlist could be made by leaving Bryan Adams out. He was talking about Jane Austen and libraries, but the sentiment is the same. I have about as much love for the groover from Vancouver as Mr. Clements did for Pride and Prejudice. Still, I'd like to avoid several nasty emails, so I have reluctantly included a Bryan Adams song. I picked When You're Gone, his duet with Mel C, the best Spice Girl. Hawksley Workman, Jealous of Your Cigarette. I had a whole Hawksley Workman phase back in the early aughts, and it started with Jealous of Your Cigarette. Turns out a lot of Canadian teens did as well, so I'm including this little gem from Workman's breakout album, The Delicious Wolves. If you're unfamiliar with this song, remedy that right away by watching the excellent video. Not only did they write some incredible songs, such as Heart Like a Wheel and Talk to Me of Mendocino, but Kate gave the world Rufus and Martha Wainwright, two of Canada's best songwriters. And then, to top it off, they sang one of the most Canadian ditties of all time, The Log Driver's Waltz, which soundtracks the NFB's best animated short ever, in my opinion. Is there anything more Canadian than watching this beflannelled, bet-2-kid lumberjack high step over a moose, mid-burl? There is not. Hey Rosetta, Red Heart. It's rare to find a Canada Day playlist without Newfoundland's Great Big Sea, but my playlist leaves them out intentionally because they're decidedly not for me. Instead, how about a track by Hey Rosetta, a better Newfoundland band? Red Heart is a big, bombastic sing-along from their 2008 album, Into Your Lungs, which has the added Canadian-ness of being produced by Hawksley Workman. So Canadian, Cardinal Official, Bacardi slang. If I had my way, this playlist would be loaded with turn-of-the-century Canadian hip-hop. Chockler, Maestra Fresh Wes, $1.65, even. But alas, this is a 2-hour playlist, so I had to be a little more economical about it. To represent the era, I've chosen Toronto-born Cardinal Official's Bacardi slang, which Genius calls the Canadian version of Big L's Ebonics. We don't say, you know what I'm saying. Official raps. T. says, you done know. Granted, no one calls it T. anymore, but still. The Cardinal knows what's up. Feist, Mushabumi was tempted to pick a more obscure Feist jam, almost crimes from broken social scenes you forgot it in people. At the end of the day, however, this playlist may have my name on it, but it's for the people. So, I picked one you're sure to know. Granted, the song hasn't aged well lyrically, it's all about the dream of having a man, and staying home to raise his kids, but that's fine. Mushaboom is mostly about the sound, anyway. The band, the way there it is. The greatest Canadian song of all time. People often forget the band is Canadian, probably because they played so much Americana music, but 4/5 of the group hails from north of the border. For a while, they even called themselves the Canadian Squires. So it brings me great pleasure to include The Wait, a classic sing-along that is, in my mind, impossible to dislike. If you disagree and want to scream about it, my email is at the bottom of this post, so go ahead and put the load right on me. Arcade Fire, wake up Montreal indie rockers. Arcade Fire are well on their way to becoming the next U2. I mean that as an insult. But like U2, their early stuff is excellent, regardless of what you think of where they are now. Debut album Funeral is a near-perfect long player, and like many Canadian college kids, it was all I listened to for several months after then upstart music review website Pitchfork told me how good it was. I was always partial to the opener, Tunnels, but Wake Up has become the anthem, so it's the one I've chosen to include here. The Guess Who, These Ice. Remember earlier when I sneered at classic rock? Consider this a peace offering to anyone offended. As a rule, I agree with the Weaker Thans, who in their song on this playlist sang, "The Guess Who sucked, but These Eyes most assuredly does not suck." It's also very Canadian, and never more so than when Canadian actor Michael Cera sang it, poorly, to a room full of cokeheads in Superbad. That entire scene is a part of our heritage. Nelly Furtado, I'm Like a Bird. I've always really liked I'm Like a Bird. It's that moment when Victoria's Nelly Furtado sings, and I'm scared that we may fall through woo 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 woo. That's fun. We all liked that, right? Michael Bublé, haven't met you yet. Don't think I've ever heard anyone say an unkind word about Burnaby's Michael Bublé, so allow me to be the first. His voice is too smooth. I prefer my standards sung by people who clearly smoked for years. Still, I've always been partial to Bublé's poppier output, so if we must include a Bublé single, let's make it the charming Haven't Met You Yet. It's the crooner's biggest hit for a reason. A Tribe Called Red, Stadium Pow Wow. A Tribe Called Red is Canada's reigning Group of the Year after winning the Juno 2 months back, and deservedly so. Their music is fun, and it sounds like nothing else, although it remains unmistakably Canadian. Consider, Stadium Pow Wow is an Indigenous-themed banger that's tailor-made for hockey arenas. That's very Canadian. So is the fact that this song's video won a Much Music Video Award. But really it's here because it just friggin' slaps. Love Inc. Broken Bone as no Canada Day playlist, at least one curated by yours truly, is complete without a nod to Canada's obsession with Eurodance in the early aughts. A number of dance and techno artists saw success during this period, but no one saw more than Love Inc., who had 2 hits. Broken Bones, included here, and You're a Superstar. I went with Broken Bones for that Take a Ride on a Purple Airplane line, which still baffles me. I think it's about drugs. But what kind of drugs? If you know, let me know. Soul Citizen faded right around the same time Love Inc. was having success. The boy band craze was sweeping North America, and Canada had several entrants. B4-4, The Moffats. But my favorite Canadian boy band remains Much Music Countdown stalwarts Soul Decision, who had their biggest hit with Faded. Nominated for the 2001 Juno for Song of the Year, along with Treble Chargers' American Psycho and Jack Soul's Can't Stop, it lost to Nelly Furtado's I'm Like a Bird. That was the right choice then, and it remains the right choice now, especially considering the lyrics to Faded have not aged well. But it's still an irresistible slice of Canadian pop that's about as funky as Folks Get Up Here. Spin it at your next party and watch how many people can't help but sing along. Len, Steal My Sunshine. Fun fact, Steal My Sunshine samples a short instrumental bit from disco group Andrea True Connection's 1976 hit More. I thought it was a fun fact, at least. Like Faded a year later, Steal My Sunshine earned a Juno nomination for Single of the Year, but it lost too. Bob Cajun was that year's winner, beating out this song, as well as Matthew Good Band's Hello Time Bomb and Prozac Sucks to Be You. It was a weird time for Canadian music. Alanis Morissette, You Oughta Know It's not just the greatest song ever written about Dave Coulier. Alanis Morissette's You Oughta Know is one of the greatest Canadian songs ever. Full of raw emotion and evocative, humorous lyrics. Would she go down on you in a theater? It leaves you clenching your fists in your teeth. Plus it's the perfect song to wail at karaoke or even if you're just drunk on somebody's patio. No Canada Day playlist is complete without this one. Hot Heat Bandages. Here's a weird fact about Bandages, the 2003 smash hit from Victoria indie punk group Hot Heat. The song received regular radio play not just in Canada but in the United States and the UK, until the war in the Middle East made some British radio stations wary about a song that said "Bandages" so many times. Seriously, I'd have ended the war, rather than the regular rotation of this classic Canadian track, but that's just me. Japandroids, The House That Heaven Built. Keeping with the punk theme, we have The House That Heaven Built from Vancouver punk duo Japandroids. In addition to just being an excellent song, this one has been used by the Vancouver Canucks as their entrance music, and there's nothing more Canadian than letting a hockey team hit the ice to your music. And without hats, the safety dance. Here's another one you might not know is Canadian. The Safety Dance, that very weird 80s number, is by Montreal group Men Without Hats, and it brings me great pleasure to include it on this Canada Day playlist. It's a very Canadian song, after all. Where an American might sing, "Everybody dance now," a Canadian is far more likely to sing, "You can dance if you want to." Daniel Caesar, "We find love." Wanted to include more soul on this list, but Canada sucks for that, to be honest. We have plenty of soul artists, but they don't generally score smash hits in this country. I considered Jack Soul's "Can't Stop." I even briefly considered Remy Shan's "Take a Message." In the end, though, I went with the more recent jam from Oshawa's Daniel Caesar. The gospel-influenced "We Find Love" is the standout track from his recent release, Freudian, which netted him a Grammy nomination and several Juno nods. If you haven't heard it, you'll love it. And if you have, you know why it's here. Joni Mitchell, "Big Yellow Taxi." Now Canadian playlist is complete without some Joni Mitchell. The Alberta-born folkie is a Canadian treasure, and her music remains as effective now as when she broke out in the early 70s. I waffled on which song to choose here, but eventually went with "Big Yellow Taxi," a classic. The best thing about this song? It's not the Counting Crows version. Bare Naked Ladies, "Lovers in a Dangerous Time," and finally, just like you need some hip, and some Arcade Fire, and some Joni, and some Drake, it's not Canada Day until someone puts on the Bare Naked Ladies. There were many excellent BNL songs to choose from, but I went with the one written by Bruce Cockburn for extra points. I have been quietly awarding myself points through this whole process. You'll be pleased to know that I have more points than anyone else, and have won. Happy Canada Day, Mooney at postmedia.com. Follow at Harrison Mooney. Click here to report a typo. Is there more to this story? We'd like to hear from you about this or any other stories you think we should know about. Email vandups@postmedia.com.